Hello and welcome to Unit 2 in our New Mexico history class. I wanted to run through the way that the learning modules work in this class just because you have a few different options of what you can do during each unit. So remember that from Units 2 through 6, each unit will take up 2 weeks. All of the information that you need will be located here in the learning module. So as you can see, we're here with the Unit 2 intro and objectives, the beginning of this module. Also note, you probably already have, but this table of contents here on the kind of left-hand side, you can use that to jump ahead to anything. If you need to read the intro and then come back later, you get back here and you're like, well, I just want to jump to the readings, you can click on that. Or whatever it might be. So just so you know that. What I want to focus on during the first part of this screencast is this section here. So this will be included in every unit, and it explains to you what you need to do during the first week, what you need to do during the second week, and which items are optional. So for example, starting today on June 1st, and maybe you'll watch this later, but starting with June 1st, this unit opens, and during this first week, you will need to complete the required readings and view the film clips. That's not optional, that's something that you have to begin with for every single unit. Then you can choose by the first Friday of the unit, so this coming Friday, to either post 15 reading tweets or submit 10 multiple choice questions. And the places to do that are listed below. You'll work on Twitter, of course, for the reading tweets. There's a section of the module to remind you of that. Also, there's a section that will take you to where you will submit your multiple choice questions. If you have any questions about how to do either of those two assignments, you can come over here to the far left-hand side on course content. You can look up reading tweets, or you can look up e-text assignments. That's where the multiple choice question description is. So there's that information, and you can, again, choose one or the other. The overall idea is that you have to earn 225 points for each unit in order to be successful in that unit or to get full credit. So if you want to, say, complete 8 reading tweets and 4 multiple choice questions, then you'll be in a good place moving into the second week. That's only if you want to kind of change things up. It might be just as easy or easier to do one or the other on that. But again, it's an option you have. You can kind of mix and match that how you would like. Moving on to the second week, so beginning a week from today on Monday the 8th, I think that would be. You have to post a discussion question and then submit 2 responses. The discussion question is due on that second Monday by midnight. That is the 8th. And then the responses are due by that second Friday or the following Friday. That's the pattern that will follow throughout all of the units when you have a discussion. Blogs will operate just slightly differently, but it's kind of the same idea in terms of the due dates. So whenever there's a discussion or a blog, that is required. It's not optional. You can't skip those and then do other activities in order to make up the 225 points. You can't pass the class without completing the discussions and the blogs because they're the core of our course content and our interactions with each other. Once you've done the discussion question, you'll want to move on and either complete a journal entry or complete up to 4 glossary entries for the e-text. And remember, if you're wondering what you have to do for those, you can come over here to journals or to the e-text assignments, and you'll find the requirements for the glossary entries. Then below you'll have the unit objectives. So these are the kind of content objectives that we're looking at this unit in terms of what we're covering about New Mexico's first peoples and the early stages of contact and conquest. So that's just a broad overview of how to navigate our class and what is required during each unit. So I hope that you find that helpful. Now that you've seen how to navigate the units or the learning modules and the assignments that we have, let me just comment briefly on where we're going during this particular learning module. So, as is all too often the case in this class, we have a lot of ground to cover pretty quickly. So we're going to be talking about the earliest people to live in New Mexico, how they migrated to the New Mexico area, what kinds of decisions they had to make about their lifeways, the kinds of homes they built, the communities they created, what kinds of social, political, and religious structures they had, um, and what that meant for the ancestral Puebloan and the Mogollon people looking to the future. By about 1200, there were some major natural catastrophes, including drought and famine, as well as newcomers from the north called the Athapascan people. Um, that all kind of came together and caused some of the first peoples to leave their homes at Chaco Canyon, Mesa Verde, some of the Mogollon sites in what is today southwestern New Mexico, and they migrated to new home sites along the Rio Grande, along some of the other rivers in this region, in order to have more water. But they also had to adapt their lifeways as they had to adapt to their environments. They had to adapt to the availability, or I guess I should say the lack of availability of megafauna um, by that time, and over quite a long period of time prior to that abandonment, they had been dealing with that adaptation. So let's not confuse that one with the 1200 CE migration. But they were people who were used to adapting. They were used to um, creating new livelihoods from their environment. And they were able to create a thriving culture along the Rio Grande corridor over that period of 300 years or so prior to Spanish contact. We're going to learn about Alvar Nunez Cabeza de Vaca, who was shipwrecked off of Florida, then with three other survivors of a large expedition, wandered through not quite New Mexico, but what is today the U.S.-Mexico borderlands, and met indigenous people in the region, and came to understand them on different terms than most Spanish explorers did. And so we'll think about the reasons why that was the case and why it didn't hold up. Why Cabeza de Vaca's experience didn't create a more tempered and peaceful contact between indigenous peoples and the explorers that we call the Spanish explorers. Finally, we'll wind up by looking at the patterns of conquest that the Spaniards used as they came to the Americas. Many of those got their start back in the Iberian Peninsula and then were transferred to the Americas in different places. So we'll look briefly in the e-text at the conquest of Tenochtitlan by Hernan Cortez and his group. Of course, it's not him personally or single-handedly that should have the credit there. And that's the case also for someone like Coronado, or then for Juan de Oñate, who will kind of bridge this unit and the next. As we move into Unit 3, we'll be talking about Oñate's initial colonization and the lead up to the Pueblo Revolt. And so we have to think about how the events that we're talking about during Unit 2, the earliest history of New Mexico, shaped the region and shaped the kind of contact that would take place in this area. And then, of course, as I've alluded to, Spaniards also brought their own ideas with them, which meant certain things for how the contact and the conquest would go. Finally, with this unit, something we want to think about are oral histories. As we talked about in Unit 1, history is like putting together pieces of a puzzle. It's like trying to figure out the best picture of the past available with the kinds of evidence that we have. One of those pieces of evidence is oral history evidence, or oral traditions that are passed down amongst Native peoples. And many of these people had kept their own histories in that way by passing down oral stories from generation to generation rather than having written them down. And so some questions to think about then are, what are some of the problems with oral histories, but then what are some of the problems with written histories? How do they overlap in terms of the problems we have to think about when we look at both of those types of primary sources through a critical lens? and how can we incorporate elements of both in order to tell a fuller picture about New Mexico's past. So that's where we're headed this unit. I hope that you enjoy Unit 2.